When it comes to FNAF, a lot of people seem to think that everything that's ever been included in this series means something, that every single event or moment has a major significance to the overall story. Well, that's just simply not the case, and we've ignored multiple details over the past 8 years. And I'm going to show you not only some that we're actively ignoring now, but some that we're going to have to ignore if we really want to know what happened. So those details that we can't really give any credit are what we're exploring today. Let's do it. In at 10, same path. Now, part of the strategy behind the FNAF games is that the animatronics will always follow the same route every time, or I guess rather they'll come towards you the same way every time. In FNAF 1 specifically, Bonnie always comes down the left hall, while Chica and Freddy always go down the right side, and the same remains true for the rest of the games, which technically, if you think about it, means that these characters are coded this way. If they were just free roaming, that would be one thing, but the fact that they come after you and do so the same way each time would suggest that this is actually intentional. I mean, yeah, sure, twice is a coincidence, but don't they say that 3 is a pattern? Well, it's the same thing here, okay? In multiple games, the animatronics come down the same path every time. FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 4, Ultimate Custom Night, and not even just that, but the fact that the animatronics do this multiple times within the same game. Hell, how many times does Bonnie come at you down the left hall in one night, let alone throughout the whole week that you play? So yeah, we would have to logically ignore this detail because it would muddy everything else up way too much. And we have been, actually. In at 9, 1987 Easter egg. At the end of every FNAF game, there is a bonus night. It gives you a bit more lore clues and more scares, and that's what we consider the 6th night. But then after beating it, you unlock a special 7th night where you can customize the level of the animatronics and give them specific difficulty ratings to see how you can actually handle those certain scenarios. However, if you were to do this with Five Nights 1, you'd obviously be looking for more clues since we literally had nothing else, and we were trying to figure out what would first be an incredible series of games. But if you tried to solve anything and you tried to be a little sneaky to figure out what that whole bite thing was about, and you put the animatronic levels to be 1987 in that order, like 1, 9, 8, and 7, the year of the bite, you'd end up getting instantly jump scared by Golden Freddy. Which is funny, but it could have had deeper implications. If you look at it through the lens of every detail means something, if you end up really thinking about it, and probably too much, you can end up seeing this as an implication that maybe Golden Freddy caused the bite of 87, and that Jeremy Fitzgerald, who we would play as in FNAF 2, who many assume to be the bite victim, could be the one possessing the animatronic. At least if we ignore that the whole missing children's incident thing takes place 2 years prior. But then again, that's just something else that we would have to ignore, so it still works. In at 8, Death Coin. In Ultimate Custom Night, you are able to get an item called a Death Coin. This allows you to use it and eliminate any animatronic from the game. This works with most animatronics. It removes them from play, and then you won't have to deal with them for the rest of that playthrough, or I guess technically life. I'm not really sure how Ultimate Custom Night defines things. But there is, at least to my knowledge, one animatronic that this coin does not work on, that being Golden Freddy. If you try it on Golden Freddy and you use the death coin on him, you end up getting jump scared by the Fredbear plush, who some believe is meant to be Psychic Friend Fredbear. And while it would make sense that you can't remove Golden Freddy because seemingly they'd be the one controlling everything, or the animatronic that gives you the most grief depending on the situation you believe is taking place, the fact that Fredbear is the one that jump scares you, the actual like plush, has to kind of be taken with a grain of salt. Because honestly, it may not have that deep of an impact. And if it did, we have really no idea what the hell that would be. Especially when Ultimate Custom Night seemingly tried to wrap up the Afton family storyline. And it's 7, Joy of Creation. There are actually some references to some of the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative games in Security Breach. For example, the Joy of Creation Easter egg of Ignited Freddy and Ignited Bonnie, found on the House of Bear and House of Bear 2 arcade cabinets found around the Pizzaplex. This is something that I actually picked up on my first time through, so needless to say, it was pretty cool that I was right about that. And I was like, hey, isn't that Ignited Freddy? And it was. And the House of Bear cabinet has like the Ignited Freddy shadow standing in the doorway, and then the House of Bear 2 machine features Ignited Bonnie's face, which could be considered Withered Bonnie, but given the context of the Ignited Freddy in the first one, I'm gonna have to say it's Ignited Bonnie. But if you really want to think about this, this could explain how like the Fazbear games fit into the timeline, since the Fanverse could be the games that Scott's In Universe counterpart made, which would explain why they would have their own FNAF 1 titled FNAF Plus, but honestly, we're probably meant to ignore this idea, because let's be honest, if that was the FNAF 1 of this universe, the company wouldn't have arcade cabinets featuring the characters. So, this is probably just meant to be like a happy little reference for fans of that series and nothing more. Plus, it's Steelwool who was doing that, and not Scott. And at 6, crashing. Golden Freddy has some weird abilities, okay? Like, what's with the whole crashing us to the desktop thing? Every other animatronic sends us to the main menu, but Golden Freddy for some reason sends us to our desktop. It's a very odd detail that I don't think anyone was really questioning, but it certainly seems to indicate that there could be something special about the character. Well, I mean, something more. And I don't think that it's simply maybe they're just angrier than everyone else and something like that. It would have to be more symbolic, because the only character that, when killing us, crashes us to our desktop is Nightmare from FNAF 4. They're the only two animatronics to crash us to the desktop instead of to the main menu, and while with Golden Freddy it may not make much sense, with Nightmare having the same ability, it may set a baseline for what's really actually happening when this happens. Nightmare in FNAF 4 is representative of death. When Nightmare gets us, we crash to the desktop in that game and truly die, which would mean that the same would have to be true for Golden Freddy, right? But then, that would make a whole load of other things messy if you want to assume that Golden Freddy is a real animatronic and possessed by Cassidy, who also is possessing William. So, you would have to ignore that detail if you're going down that route. Halfway through into number 5, Ultimate Custom Night Roster. If you want to go down the path of Cassidy being the one you should not have killed, that's fine with me, as long as you don't use that path of thinking to insult anyone who thinks otherwise. Since, after all, nothing is truly proven with this series literally ever. But, if you do believe that, for some reason Cassidy is possessing William to keep him alive to continue suffering, you kind of have to ignore the animatronics present in Ultimate Custom Night. Because there is no possible way that Cassidy could know about the Nightmare animatronics. It doesn't make sense if she did. Crying Child is the one who's seeing these nightmares in his coma while in the hospital in FNAF 4, as evidenced by the flatline that we hear at the end of the game. And since he dies before waking up, he wouldn't be able to share this information with anyone. You can say that he let Cassidy know about them while they were sharing Golden Freddy or something, but that's you ignoring other details in the series. And if Cassidy wasn't Golden Freddy, how could she also be possessing William? You'd again be ignoring every other detail that we've learned about possession. And why are the animatronics calling the one you should not have killed him if it is Cassidy? Cassidy is a female in this universe, as evidenced by her counterpart in the novel trilogy and the only other human in the logbook. And if you want to say that they're saying him because of Golden Freddy, again, how could she be possessing both? And why would she make these animatronics that she is creating call her him? If she's mad about being killed, why would she be referring to herself by her animatronic? Okay, it doesn't make sense. Unless Cassidy is possessing William as the vengeful spirit and the one you should not have killed is Crying Child, who Cassidy is using to torment William. But even still, for this to work, you'd have to ignore the nightmares being present in that game. And at 4, Nightmares in VR. On that same line of thinking, how are the Nightmare animatronics present in FNAF VR? If we are to assume that FNAF 4 is an actual canon plot point in the series, then these animatronics being present would be impossible. The only way that this could make sense would be if FNAF 4 specifically was one of the games that Scott's in-universe counterpart made. That's the only way that Fazbear Entertainment would know what these animatronics looked like. And it would explain why they would be present in the game that they're using to say like, yeah, this happened, but we're better now. Since they're trying to rebuild their reputation as we learn in this game. But that also calls into question every other game that we've played, because FNAF 1, 2, 3, parts of 4, and even sister location animatronics are in FNAF VR, which would mean that if they remade FNAF 4 because it was an in-universe game, every other FNAF game before this or even before FNAF 6 would be just that, a game. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Fire Dave. Found in one of the various lore duffel bags that we can stumble upon in Security Breach, it's a customer complaint titled Hi Dave, which upon inspection reads, quote, "Customer complaint. You should fire Dave. He sucks." And while it is short and sweet and to the point, it's also seemingly a reference to the FNAF novels, since if you're unaware, in the novels William Afton was introduced, but at first he was going by the alias of Dave Miller. And considering how this customer says that you should fire Dave, I think that's a pretty telling way to reference the book's most infamous employee. And it's also a reference to the fact that Afton is in the Pizzaplex right below our noses, or I guess technically our feet. Though we would have to ignore this detail because it's not really going to have much more of an impact than that, just being a reference. It's just gonna be a guy named Dave, okay? No connection to anyone else. Especially since, again, this game was from Steel Wool and not just Scott Cawthon, which is where most people tend to use the whole idea of, if Scott put it in the game, it has to mean something. But if you wanna say that, and you don't wanna listen to literally anything else I've said on this list, this was made by Steel Wool, so can't really use that here. But ultimately, in at number 2, Jeremy. If you spend too much time looking into names, then you're really going to be in for a crapshoot when it comes to FNAF. Considering how Scott has used the first name Jeremy way too many times for a fanbase as detail attentive as this one, because the name Jeremy has been used for the first night guard from FNAF 2, the victim who possesses Bonnie, and the first Freddy Fazbear virtual experience game tester who ends up cutting his face off because Glitch Trap got to him. If you really want to think that Scott puts every single detail in this and like it's meant for those details to all mean something special, how do you explain this? Okay, most of the time people just write this off as a troll, which means that if this is a troll, other things could be trolls too, right? You can't just say that everything means something aside from the Jeremy thing. That just doesn't make any form of logical sense. And you know what? It doesn't even make a form of unlogical sense. Since if anything, the name being used 3 times would be more important than like passing comments made in one game, right? Exactly. But it doesn't mean anything, okay? Bonnie isn't getting resurrected multiple times. Jeremy isn't Satan or something like that. It's just a name. It's not that deep. Finally, in at number 1, Immortal and the Restless. This detail is the reason I made this entire list. This is one comment that I have been seeing time and time again. The Immortal and the Restless was a show to show us that Afton didn't want his kid or kids, so this theory makes no sense. These details and all the others are put in there for a reason. But like, we just went over 9 details that we have to ignore either in general for things to make sense or for your certain line of thinking to make sense. Or that we've just been ignoring the whole time, meaning that we can't take every single pixel of a scene into account when trying to find the big picture. The Immortal and the Restless has never popped up again after Sister Location. There has never been another instance of that show having any significance other than just being something we watched after work in that game. It didn't reveal the mother's name, it didn't reveal that Afton never wanted his son, because if he never wanted Crying Child, why would he have sworn to put him back together? Or revealed to Michael that Elizabeth was possessed, or literally anything else that we've seen happen in this series. It just doesn't make sense. The Immortal and the Restless shows up less often than the name Jeremy. And honestly, it has just as little significance as the name. It was a soap opera, okay? What I watch on TV doesn't mirror my life or my family's situation unless it's Dr. Phil. And why would it mean that William didn't want Crying Child? Why couldn't it be that William thought his wife was having an affair? Maybe if this does have significance, it's meant to show that William snapped and killed his wife when Crying Child was born because he didn't think that it was his son. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for coming to my Fred Talk. Schooled. That's all the time we have for today, friends. Thank you all so much for watching. I have been Showerman Connor Monroe, and I'll see you in another video. Light your pitchforks and torches in the comments, baby.